In this tutorial, we're going to focus on how to create a black and white look, and I'll show you two different methods we can use to achieve the look of black and white film stock. There's a certain nostalgia of black and white film, and we can see it in modern films like Sin City, silent black and white film, The Artist, and horror film, The Eyes of My Mother. Now, when it comes to the black and white look, it's not uncommon for people to suggest that all we need to do is just desaturate the image and then we're done, right? Well, not exactly. Lowering the saturation will take the color out, but the end result is just a grayscale image of something shot on a color sensor. Recreating the look of black and white film requires desaturation, but it's all about how we mix the separate channels of red, green, and blue to get the different densities. So let's jump in. I'll first reduce the saturation to 0 so that we can save it as a version for comparing later. I'll add a new version. Reset the node. And now we'll use the RGB mixer found under the RGB mixer tab to mix the luma information between the different RGB channels. We'll need to set it to monochromatic, and now we can do any combination of mixing by adjusting the red, green, and blue sliders. I typically will adjust the red channel up and reduce some of the green and blue. Okay, that looks good. Here's the previous version so that you can see the difference. It's a much closer look to black and white film stock. Now for our last technique, I'll add a new version, reset the node, and now what I'll do is create a few different parallel nodes and a serial node after the parallel nodes. The idea here is that we can selectively choose which parts of the image that we want to figuratively paint lighter or darker. For example, in the first parallel node, I'll pull a quick key on the sky. Make sure to have plenty of blur on the key. In the next node down, I'll pull a quick key on the car, also adding some blur. And finally, key on the skin tones on the bottom node. You can see that this also takes in some of the building. Now jumping to the serial node, I'll zero out the saturation. Then going back to each of the parallel nodes, I'll make some contrast adjustments to either the shadows, midtones, or highlights. Starting on the sky, I'll bring down the midtones and shadows. On the parallel node with the car, I'll bring down the shadows and the midtones a lot, as deep red tends to be a dark color in black and white film. Finally, on the skin tones, I'll bring them up a bit in the midtones. And voila! We have a convincing black and white film grade. Now let's compare the three different versions and review. We have our reduced saturation look, the mixed luma information from the RGB mixer, and finally the secondaries selective approach where we painted each of the elements either lighter or darker. Cycling back through them again, you can see we have sort of a good, better, and best. So if you're ever required to grade something in black and white, I strongly suggest going with at least the RGB mixer approach, as anybody can just drop the saturation. And if you have the time and budget, I suggest the secondaries selective approach. I hope that you've enjoyed this tutorial on emulating black and white film and that you'll enjoy practicing each of these different techniques.